Thank you for the introduction. So I've always been one of those students who waits to the last second and then sends his project in at the last minute, and did that again last night. So I went home and trashed the slides I had after hearing yesterday's talk, and thank you to Charles and Joe for accepting them at about 10:30 last night. A lot of things came up, and I figured I'd touch on what it really means to feed cows in this country. There's a great Mike Tyson quote, and it really reflects how dairy nutritionists work with dairymen. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. When you feed cows every day on a practicing dairy, that's what it feels like. You don't know what's going to happen. This is photos from yesterday, and this is the reality of diets in California. The photo with the hand in it on the far side there is produce waste. Those bagged salads you buy at the grocery store, this is what comes out of that, and we feed it to cows. It's fantastic feed. The question is, what is it? Is it a concentrate? Is it a forage? We talked about this yesterday. What kind of diets reduce methane? There are no models that we design diets with today, practicing, that even have that as an ingredient. Joe was here yesterday talking about almond hulls. The analytical procedures we use for almond hulls don't account for 20 to 30% of the mass. Why? Because they're not designed for almond hulls. We have a lot of problems at the fundamental level, yet alone where we go with designing diets. The next two photos arrived when I was sitting in the back yesterday watching the talks. That's cherries. We got a great cherry season right now. Too many cherries, they don't make grade, we're gonna feed them to cattle. The other photo is the backside of that same pile. Those are the leaves. So that's not really cherries. We won't get an analysis back on that sample before the pile's gone. That's what happens on a daily basis with a lot of the byproducts in California. And there was a list yesterday of all the byproducts, and California does recycle a lot of products through cattle. What the world considers byproducts is not the list here. These are the real things we get. Canola, which was on yesterday's list, comes from Canada. We import it. The carbon footprint of that has to do with trains and exports and so forth. This is a real opportunity we have, and I don't know how any of the ingredients we talked about to reduce methane are even going to interact with those diets. And then we talked about phenotype, and I asked some questions yesterday, so I want to touch on this. 2020, I remember getting a call driving down the highway, and one of my co-panelists is going to be up here in a minute. I left his dairy the day before. COVID year. Well, we also had massive fires in the state. And we did lose 10 to 15% of the milk just associated with the smoke inhalation on these cows. Why? That's what happens when the environment impacts the animal's decision to what she does. Because she gets a decision in this, every activity we do. Does she go eat? Does she not go eat? Does she sleep? Last week with Dr. Van Amberg from Cornell, we had a conversation, and he talked about microenvironments. In that context, he meant the rumen bolus itself. What's in that bolus? How often does she chew it? How do the microbes in that bolus interact with the feed? That's a different impact on phenotype that we're not discussing. And when you add heat stress to that mix, and the work from Lance Baumgart's group out of Iowa State on heat stress and leaky gut, where the bugs change because of the host interaction due to her response, we have no idea what that does to the rumen itself. The true microbiome researchers out there will tell you we know next to nothing, because we don't. And then there's the last question up there. If we got 10 nutritionists up here and you asked them what a forage was, we'd have a debate, and we'd have no answers. Corn silage is a forage. That's 30% starch, which means it's 30% concentrate. What is an almond hull? Is it measured like a forage? Is it a concentrate? How does it feed? We're creating definitions for how we use products, but the people who do it every day don't agree on those definitions to start with. And then we got to get the cow to agree, which is all that matters in the end. Does she want to make more milk? Does she want to lay down? Does she want to get pregnant? That's what my phone calls are about. And then I found this. This slide did stay in my deck. I didn't have to rebuild this one. McKinsey & Company had a report. They asked dairy executives what they cared about. I grabbed the part that was relevant to this. There was a lot of things they care about in their business. They care about the gap and the number of steps in the sustainability process between the producer and the consumer, because it gets more expensive. As we figure out how to incentivize dairymen and beef producers and anybody in this industry to include an ingredient that adds cost, we got to minimize the impact and its cost. It's got to be profitable. That means it's got to make money beyond inflation, beyond the interest rate, and beyond the internal rate of return. And then I'd love to say the consumer wanted to pay for it all, but how do you convince them? I know we talked about it, but I haven't seen, there was one bit of data from the Environmental Defense Fund, which is great, that about 27% of the millennials and Gen Z, if I got it right, agreed they were willing to buy from companies that were engaged in this. That means 63% were not. We got to convince them to pay the bill. So this is the opportunity. If we've got 40% almost covered, and the rest of it on the right-hand side is where all the opportunity sits to make a real impact beyond our state mandate here in California, we have to incentivize people who make money and who are willing to pay for value to compensate those who do not. So a byproduct is defined as a commodity that does not do more than break even on average for the average producer. That's what a dairyman is on average. If you're average, you don't make a dime. No one in this room would be happy with that outcome. My producers aren't. Creameries, some of them operate in the same fashion. They sell their product into a market and can't dictate the price. So how can we expect those costs to be borne by either one of those two groups? The food brands, the conglomerates that are out there that are advocating this, fantastic. It's a great activity and a large goal. But we have to get the value out of the consumer and back to the primary supplier to make this happen financially profitable for anybody in this, if it's beef or if it's dairy. There's a quote that came out of W.C. Wells, "Don't work with kids or animals." Everybody in this room decided to work with animals. They don't always agree with what the science says, and that was said very well in the prior talk. We're not going to get 100% success on any of these products. We saw yesterday different scenarios, different responses to 3-NOP, to nitrates, and to essential oils, and to fats. But if we don't try to move forward faster and fail more often, but fail the same way, don't fail the same way twice, we're going to be here a year from now or 5 years from now with the same questions. We got to get things into the market and start trying them and getting changes to actually be applied. And with that, I thank you.